Steven Spielberg is undeniably one of the most influential directors of our time. Schindler's List, Indiana Jones, and Jaws. These aren't just films. They're cinematic landmarks cherished by audiences globally and have achieved iconic status over the years. Yet, there's one movie that holds a special place in Spielberg's heart, a film he was once hesitant about ever releasing. The Fabelmans. The 76-year-old Spielberg steps into the shoes of Sammy, a youthful version of himself, taking us on a deeply personal journey that revisits pivotal moments from his past. But why now? Why would he dive into such a personal story after achieving worldwide acclaim and unparalleled success in the industry? Using directors like Irritu, Alfonso Cuarón, Paolo Sorrentino, and Spielberg himself as examples, we'll delve into what these introspective films mean to their creators and explore why these films can be seen as a kind of public psychotherapy session. Once, there was an 18-year-old curly-haired young man named Fabietto. Inspired by the warm sun and vast sea near his hometown of Naples, he lived in a large family. Together, they would gather outside the city in a garden overlooking Capri, eat juicy watermelon, tease each other, and often apologize for pranks that went a bit too far. Fabietto soaked in all of the romance of youth surrounded by family. But on a day that was joyous for the entire town, tragedy struck our protagonist.
Fabietto's parents tragically died at home due to a gas leak, and he was not home at the time. He was watching a soccer match, and at the very same moment, the famed footballer, Maradona, scored his legendary Hand of God goal.
On one hand, this story paints a portrait of young Fabietto. On the other, it reflects the tragic past of director Paolo Sorrentino. It's also a loosely interpreted autobiography of the talented filmmaker behind masterpieces like The Great Beauty, Youth, and The Young Pope. Movies that have significantly shaped both global cinema and specifically the Italian film industry. The scene in which Fabietto learns about the death of his parents in the hospital closely mirrors what Sorrentino remembers and can never forget. The director has always grappled with his feelings about that day. He survived, while for his parents, it was their last day. Diego Maradona became a real savior for the future director. In return, Sorrentino would go on to feature the soccer legend in almost every one of his films, reminding himself who gave him the chance to engage with art and create his distinctive works. This sentiment inspired the title of his personal movie, The Hand of God, È stata la mano di Dio, referencing the match where Maradona famously scored with his hand, a goal that counted. For the director, Maradona isn't just a soccer player, but a divine figure who paved his artistic journey. Sorrentino truly believes in the significance of saying proper goodbyes to people. If one doesn't get the chance in life, the world of cinema offers a way to manifest that longing. The urge to reflect on the past isn't bound by age. Sorrentino chose to bring his most poignant and, at times, melancholic life chapters to the screen when he turned 50. On the other hand, Steven Spielberg felt that call 26 years later in his life. In The Fabelmans, the young protagonist Sammy has a transformative experience when he steps into a cinema with his family for the first time. Suddenly, he grasps the profound allure of film, both as an audience member and a potential creator. As the years roll by, the passion intensifies, yet those around him dismiss his ardor for cinema as a mere hobby. Internally, Sammy wrestles with a decision. Should he chase his cinematic dream against the opinions of others and truly become a filmmaker?
But you, Mr. Director, you don't want to do this. But your daddy tells you because you want to make your war picture, huh?
Navigating through school proves challenging, struggling to connect with peers and keeping mostly to himself. His heart and mind dedicated to the world of film. For Spielberg, making this movie wasn't just a form of artistic expression. It was a way to confront and work through deeply rooted childhood traumas. The director had considered narrating the story of his parents' divorce years earlier when he was working on E.T. the Extraterrestrial. He even penned a few script pages, but eventually the idea was shelved. Still, the concept lingered. Collaborating with screenwriter Tony Kushner, a project Spielberg had mused over for more than a decade began to take shape. Kushner almost acted as a personal therapist for Spielberg during this process, helping him conceptualize The Fabelmans. It was only during the pandemic, a period offering ample time for reflection, that Spielberg felt an urgency to bring this deeply personal story to life. With the uncertainties clouding the film industry, Spielberg felt an acute need to craft something of profound significance, to channel the emotional turmoil from his parents' separation into his art. The drama surrounding Sammy's parents stems from their glaring incompatibilities. His father, being incredibly pragmatic, is engrossed in his work, often sidelining his family. Sammy's mother, on the contrary, is mood-driven, and in Sammy's perception, may not be entirely loyal to her husband, exhibiting a streak of self-centeredness. Yet, both parents bequeath unique worldviews to their son. She, with her artistic spirit, frequently spurs him to create. His father, a man of logic, elucidates the mechanics of things with precision. Spielberg meticulously showcases the dynamics of a marriage that isn't built on mutual understanding, but rather on shifting blame. It's a tale about a child witnessing the crumbling pedestals on which he once placed his parents. Spielberg and Sorrentino have distinct life stories, but they share a common thread of pain associated with their parents, a pain they attempt to encapsulate through cinema. For them, filmmaking serves as a form of therapy, an attempt to view their personal trajectories from diverse angles. Each director adopts a unique approach to reflecting on deeply personal topics. Some craft excellent replicas of themselves through fictional characters, while others, like Alfonso Cuarón, the mind behind Gravity and Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, shift the focus. In Roma, Cuarón turns the lens towards his childhood housekeeper, his second mother. Cleo serves as a prosperous doctor and his wife nurturing their 4 children, caring for the family's elderly matriarch and constantly cleaning up after an ever-messy dog. Through a heartfelt tribute to the woman who raised him, Cuarón delves into his past with dual objectives: to honor those who molded him, and simultaneously sketch an emotional tableau of societal disconnect and class structure against the backdrop of political upheaval in Mexico. It's essential to note that in 1968, 2 years before the events of the film, student protesters were massacred by government forces in a central district of Mexico City. This occurred just 10 days before the opening of the 19th Summer Olympic Games, which also took place in Cuarón's native Mexico. It's also symbolic that Cuarón chose to personally handle the cinematography for the film. Initially, it was anticipated that Emmanuel Lubezki, his long-standing cinematographer and close friend, would be behind the camera. However, due to personal reasons, Lubezki had to step away from the project. According to Cuarón, personally manning the camera allowed him to achieve an unprecedented immersion in the filming process, making the outcome even more intimate. Without flinching, he had to witness the pivotal moments, everything he had once lived through. He had been aspiring to make this film ever since his debut, Only with Your Partner, in 1991. 90% of the scenes portrayed in the movie are drawn directly from his personal memories. It was imperative for him to intricately depict the era that shaped him, but also the pivotal moments that molded his nation. The last time Cuarón filmed in Mexico was in 2001, with And Your Mother Too. Over 2 decades later, he returns to shoot in his homeland, aiming to share simple yet profound truths about family, nation, growing up, and the realm of memory. But he isn't alone in this journey. Do you know which other Mexican director returned to his roots after 20 years? Alejandro González Iñárritu. In 2000, he filmed Amores Perros in Mexico, then headed to America to further his career, crafting films such as The Revenant, Birdman, and others. After clinching his second Oscar, the director went off the radar for 7 years. During this hiatus, he immersed himself in introspection that culminated in the nearly 3-hour film, Bardo. The story follows renowned Mexican documentarian named Silverio Gama, who has been living in America for many years. His current mission? Mentally prep for an upcoming prestigious award ceremony set to take place in Los Angeles. Gama clearly is professionally adrift. Despite the accolade, his recent documentaries don't resonate with audiences, primarily because they seem too self-centered. In Bardo, Iñárritu makes it evident that the protagonist, Silverio Gama, is essentially his own alter ego. The Mexican filmmaker was meticulous in choosing an actor for the lead role, someone who could embody his younger self, complete with long hair and a beard. He chose not to delve deep into his childhood, instead spotlighting an equally significant period in his life when he grappled with a crisis of national identity. While living in America with his family and considering it home, any mention of his native Mexico stirs memories of its culture and traditions, seemingly eroding under the dominance of imperialist America. In his film, Iñárritu metaphorically portrays Mexico's lands being sold off to the company Amazon. Alejandro bears his soul, speaking of the death of a newborn, betrayed ideals, and distrust of his own people. However, he doesn't do this literally, but rather through inventive plot constructs that are heavily laced with surrealism. The more his protagonists suspect he's somehow lived his life wrongly, the more the lines blur between reality and the imagery erupting from his subconscious. Gama is suspended between homeland and foreign land, between the present and the future, reality and visions. Regardless of how audiences and critics might perceive the film, it's primarily Alejandro's cathartic release, his way of pouring out his soul. His Bardo serves as a chronicle of uncertainty, tangled memories brought to the screen in a torrent of endless visuals and metaphors. It can be likened to his personal journal, where he spills all the chaos, experiences, and inner turmoil that reside in his mind. It's not hard to identify the man who served as a muse not only for Irritu, but also for Sorrentino. That man is the Italian cinematic legend, Federico Fellini, and his loosely autobiographical masterpiece, 8½. While Irritu echoes Fellini with similar surreal images on screen, Sorrentino directly showcases this in his film, where his protagonist is profoundly inspired by him. The film 8½ was crafted back in 1963, several decades ago. This reminds us that directors have always been creating autobiographical films, not because audiences demanded it, but because of the director's own inner need. None of the aforementioned films ranked in significant box office returns, and they didn't need to. They exist beyond the scope of commercial demands. Every director had their own motivation. For Cuarón, Roma was an opportunity to reveal his true self to the world, a content and refined artist who doesn't need the vastness of space or sky-high budgets to strive for perfection. Spielberg aimed to address his younger self, vocalizing through the words of his mother's brother that it's challenging to fully balance family and art. Sorrentino, known for constantly reflecting on eternity through his films, tries to find echoes of immortality in his own youth with The Hand of God. Irritu grapples with overcoming a crisis of national identity. In every director's journey, there comes a moment when the past becomes not just a source of inspiration, but something greater, inseparable from them. As we've uncovered, directors have the power to express emotions and gain deeper self-understanding through their cinematic creations. We, as audiences, can empathize with the characters and follow their on-screen lives. However, each of us has our own unique path to navigate.